on the agenda. And we have one sign up so far, which is Grace Sinden, and I'd like to welcome you up to the microphone.
Okay. Oh, it doesn't stay. Does it stay? Okay. Or should I hold this? Okay. Been a long time since I've been here. Good evening. My name is Grace Sinden. I live on Ridgeview Circle in Princeton. I've served on various Princeton boards and commissions for many years, including the Princeton Emergency Planning Committee, chaired by Bob Gregory, whose untimely death we mourn. My condolences to his family and colleagues. I would like to make my comments in tribute to Bob, whose career was devoted to public safety, including firefighting and prevention, which is my focus here tonight. The current type of combustible wood construction used in large multi-unit dwellings is not only inaffordable and senior housing, but also in large market rate and even luxury multi-unit dwellings. Not too many people know that there has been legislation proposed in the New Jersey legislature. The numbers are S-854 and A-1897 to make large wood multi-unit dwellings more fire safe. This was introduced after the huge fire in Edgewater, New Jersey in 2015, where 500 people lost their homes on a cold January night in the Avalon Bay wood housing development, causing serious displacement of families. This event was preceded in the year 2000 at that same site where Avalon Bay's development under construction went up in flames, and it destroyed 9 nearby occupied homes and 13 cars. This was cited in the New York Times of October 19th, 2000, under the heading, "Investigators Rule Out Arson as Cause of Fire in Edgewater." Large fires have occurred at other such sites in New Jersey, for example, in Maplewood and Lakewood, and throughout the country as combustible wood is used in ever larger and taller multi-unit dwellings. You can search Facebook, "Massive Fires Damage Lives," to see the enormity of the situation throughout the United States, including New Jersey. Such a fire in Princeton at Christmas time in 2016 at Griggs Farm left 1 person dead and 35 homeless. It took more than a year to rebuild the burned units. This particular fire might have been worse if the existing spaces between buildings had not existed. In addition, these units consist of 2 to 3 stories, as opposed to such housing being built today with larger, taller buildings, creating greater safety challenges. In 2016, the Princeton Council sent a resolution to the New Jersey legislature supporting legislation to make large multi-unit dwelling units constructed of wood more fire safe. Some of this type of wood, which is even weaker, is called engineered wood, where wood chips are glued together. The wheels of our state government grind slowly and are often influenced by powerful interests. While fire and building codes are not determined at the municipal level, our mayor, council, and relevant professional staff, working with developers, should promote more fire-safe construction for large multi-unit developments in Princeton. Some of the key fire-safer solutions include using non-combustible construction materials such as masonry, concrete, and heavy steel, light steel buckles in intense heat. If wood construction is used, there should be space between buildings and a limited number of units per floor and building, rather than the current huge attached unit structures, which are more prone to spread of the massive fires witnessed. Attached is a one-page summary of the proposed state legislation, which has been stuck since 2015. Thus, the appeal to the municipal level for action. We all recognize that affordable and senior housing is needed, but such housing, as well as market rate, should not expose residents to less fire safety. Increasingly, the fire codes have been degraded at the national and state level, in large part due to developer influences in the code formulation process. The voices of firefighters and first responders who do not have the resources are not heeded, as well as more powerful interests, though their safety and lives are on the line. While these code decisions are made at the state and national level, our municipal officials must promote fire-safer housing with the various developers who will build large multi-unit structures. Apparently, the cost difference between combustible wood and non-combustible materials is not great, and I give a website that can be examined, especially when compared to the risks and costs to residents and municipalities. One-sided costs are not a fair comparison. Developers are generally reimbursed by insurance for such fires. Most residents are not. If such a large fire should occur here, residents will want to know what possible preventive action was taken. Thank you for your serious consideration and action.
Thank you. And I can let you know that this has been a topic of conversation and negotiation with the two developers we're going to be talking about tonight. We are going to be voting on something called the redevelopment plan tonight, which it's mostly a zoning type document. We are also going to have a redevelopers agreement, which will come before council at our next meeting. And in that document, there will be provisions about fire safety that both developers have agreed to incorporate as part of their developments. And we're really proud that I think Princeton is known not just around the state, but around the country because of your work and massive fires save lives and your advocacy work. And we also understand that there's been improvements to the National Fire Safety Code as a result of your efforts. So thank you. And you've made a difference.
Just to add that there is a summary attachment of the one-page summary of the bill's requirements. So that would help, I think, in just getting a very quick overview.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to something that's not already on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on. So just to give a bit of background, this is the first of what is likely to be many meetings concerning the implementation of our affordable housing settlement plan. And while our plan has not been officially blessed by the court yet, we are hoping this will happen at the fairness hearing next Friday, February 7th. But we are trying to get a jump start on that and to show our good faith and commitment tonight. The affordable housing plan has several components, and tonight's meeting is going to focus on just one part of the plan, and that one part of the plan actually has two parts to it. So there's an inclusionary development with market rate units, affordable units, and affordable units designated for adults with special needs. And then there's an 100% affordable senior development. The format for tonight's meeting will consist of the following. First, we're going to hear from John Sabo, who's here from Burgess Consulting. and also from our planner, Michael Laplace, and they're going to review highlights of the redevelopment plan. Secondly, we're going to hear from our administrator, Mark DeShield, who will go through the financials for the project. Tonight's vote is specifically on the introduction of the redevelopment plan, and even though it's a type of zoning document that does not speak specifically to the financing of the project, we know that there's a lot of questions about how this is going to work. So we want to make sure we discuss that as part of the introduction tonight. As I mentioned before, there's going to be an agreement at our next meeting on February 10th that will outline the financial arrangement between Princeton and the developer of the multifamily project. But we want to make sure everybody's clear on what those funding mechanisms are going to be tonight. After Mark, we're going to hear from Laura Schwager, who is the developer from Pearl. She had a commitment with her kid, so I don't think she's here yet, but by the time we get to that part of the agenda, hopefully she'll be here. And she's the developer of the 100% senior affordable project. After we hear the presentations, we'll have questions from council, and then we'll open it up to the public for comments, and then we're going to bring it back to council for a vote. And also, just to be clear, what council's voting on tonight is the introduction of the ordinance that references the redevelopment plan. When I see a lot of experienced council meeting attendees here, but for those of you who are new to the process, the first step is the introduction. Then it will be referred to the planning board. There'll be a hearing at the planning board a week from tonight, next Thursday. The planning board will be reviewing the redevelopment plan to see if it's consistent with Princeton's master plan. Then it will come back to council at our meeting on February 10th, and that's when we'll hold the public hearing on the ordinance. It's always Princeton's practice to have public comment, not just at the public hearing, but at introduction. So everybody who's here tonight who wishes to speak to this will have an opportunity to speak tonight, but there will also be another opportunity on February 10th at the public hearing. And I also wanted to say that normally we put our ordinances up on the website at least a couple days before we're introducing them. For those of you who are looking for the materials in advance, you probably noticed that the ordinance and the plan went up this morning. That's not our preference. It's because we were continuing to work on the document, and we wanted to get it right before we posted it up on the website. And we apologize that folks didn't have as much time as normally is allotted to read through it. There will be time. It's out there now. You have time before the planning board hearing and also time before the public hearing on the 10th. And let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Just that there are going to be two votes on this. So there'll be a vote tonight to introduce, and then there'll be a final vote on the February 10th, assuming that it's introduced tonight. So with that, I want to turn it over to John to walk us through the redevelopment plan and what the provisions are in there.
Good evening. I got it on. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. For the record, my name is John Sabo. I am a senior associate with Burgess Associates. We are a planning and consulting firm. We were hired to assist the municipality of Princeton in developing its affordable housing plans and also the redevelopment plan that we're going to talk about this evening. As the mayor had said, this is an ordinance, even though it's labeled a redevelopment plan, and I'll get into the technicalities of that in a moment, but it is an ordinance, and this is just for introduction. So what I'd like to do is go through the redevelopment process so that everyone has a clear understanding of what that process means, how it's done, because procedure is important, transparency is important, and then we'll get into how this relates to the community in terms of its housing goals, its master planning, and what does it mean in a larger context in terms of future planning for the town. We're here tonight to really memorialize actions that have already brought us to this point where we are, as a municipality, required to adopt a redevelopment plan, and that's because of a memorandum of understanding that was approved between two developers, as well as a tentative settlement of agreement with the Fair Share Housing Council in settling the Princeton's affordable housing obligation in the third round under the Mount Laurel Doctrine. This is one of the required components. It will be part of the package of compliance mechanisms that will be reviewed by the court on February 7th, which is a week from tomorrow, so that determination can be made that going forward towards compliance, that Princeton will be compliant with its constitutional responsibility to provide opportunities for affordable housing. But what is redevelopment? What brought us here and what is the end product of this document is that the local redevelopment and housing law was adopted in 1992, and it was adopted to consolidate a number of various redevelopment statutes into one to make it a far more efficient process. And what it does is it provides significant tools to a municipality to address situations that the private sector won't address because of the dire need or extreme market conditions that require governmental intervention. And it provides financial and planning tools to a municipality to address disinvestment and substandard buildings and such in its community before it becomes a major negative impact on the neighborhoods that these uses are located in. So what those powers are is you have the authority to adopt a redevelopment plan after an appropriate designation. You can issue bonds for the purposes of development. You can acquire property through eminent domain, and I will address that in a moment. You can provide for leases and convey property without the need for public bid. You can collect revenue from selected developers. And finally, you can grant tax exemptions and abatements, all of which is to incentivize redevelopment, to take unproductive, otherwise blighted properties and to bring them up to a better standard and more productivity for a community. And there's a very definitive process that you have to follow under the local redevelopment housing law. First, the process requires that the governing body authorize an investigation. And that authorization goes to the planning board, and the planning board has to then evaluate a particular area as defined by the council in its resolution, and determine whether or not that area would qualify as an area in need of redevelopment. An important aspect of that authorization is designating whether or not that investigation will include condemnation or non-condemnation. And that's an important aspect because you need to specify that up front so that everyone, property owners, the public, understands that the municipality may or may not use its powers of eminent domain. In this instance, the resolution authorizing the investigation was clearly for non-condemnation. Once that is established, the municipality, Princeton, will not have any authority to condemn property to implement the redevelopment plan. The planning board then has to conduct its investigation and present its findings at a public hearing. Once it does that, it offers a recommendation to the mayor and council, and then the council can either reject the recommendation, it can accept it, or modify it. If the recommendation is accepted, then it authorizes the preparation of a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan could be prepared either by the planning board or by the council through whatever agency it wishes to use. In this instant, the council retained Burgess Associates to prepare the redevelopment plan that's before you this evening. If the plan is to be prepared other than by the planning board, then it's required that it be referred to the planning board for recommendation and review. That's going to occur provided that this is introduced this evening on February 6th. The planning board will conduct its review, determine whether it's consistent with the Princeton's master plan documents, its planning goals and objectives, its policies, and then offer recommendations to the governing body. That was also going to be done at a public meeting. The recommendation is then sent back to the mayor and council, and then the council can then accept, reject, or otherwise adopt the redevelopment plan as required. And once that happens, then it becomes law. And what happens is the redevelopment plan actually becomes a zoning ordinance specific to the properties that are identified in the redevelopment plan. So it supersedes whatever is existing on the property. It's essentially a rezoning. But it also includes all the authorities and powers that are attendant to that based on what is offered to you through the local redevelopment and housing law. So Princeton went through that process. On October 14th, 2019, the council adopted a resolution authorizing the investigation. On December 12th, 2019, the planning board decided to recommend that the council designate the Dennett Road area as an area in need of redevelopment without condemnation. And then on December 18th, the Princeton Council adopted resolution designating the area, and then they directed my firm, Burgess Associates, to prepare the redevelopment plan. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of briefly describe the property that we're talking about so that we have context. And within the redevelopment plan, there are some maps that include location, surrounding land use, what is it that we're actually talking about. The site that was designated is 100 and 101 Thornton Road, further identified as Block 5502, Lot 4 by Princeton tax assessment records. The site is right now developed with 2 3-story office buildings, each containing about 60,000 square feet. The buildings were developed between 1982, 1984, and they were typical of the type of construction that you would experience back in those days for offices. The buildings have a brick exterior. They have window designs that limit the amount of natural light entering the interior space of the buildings. They were designed with floor plates of approximately 18,000 square feet per floor, and they were designed with a single tenant in mind. And really, the building is obsolete. The buildings are obsolete. They don't really meet today's market demand in terms of the types of office space that companies are looking for. So these factors play into why these buildings have remained largely vacant for at least the past 10 years. In fact, when we were doing the investigation, we learned that out of the 2 buildings, 90% of it is unrented and has been for quite some time. The property itself, let me just slide up. This is a better look at the parcel. You can see that it's irregularly shaped. It has frontage on Dennett Road. It's 15.1 acres. This is a larger view of the area. And an aerial view. All right. So, again, the site is 15 acres. And one of the critical features that we need to be cognizant of is the fact that there are some environmental constraints on the property that impact the southerly portion of the parcel. That is, there's a stream that extends in an east-west direction through the southerly part of the site. There's a 100-year floodplain associated with that, and a wetlands also associated with part of that on the northeasterly portion of the property. So we have to take that into account as we try to develop the development plan for the property. I'm sorry? I didn't hear.
Do you have a
we'll
cursor?
get-
Do you have
we'll
a
get there.
cursor that works on your computer that
Yeah.
people can see?
All right, we'll get to the environmental.
Might be useful to actually bring up the map of the environmental constraints.
There we go. I want to skip that map. And if you look on the map here, you can see that there's a stream that runs through the southerly portion of the property. There's associated wetlands and floodplain with that, and then there's a pocket of wetlands in the northerly east part of the property here. Now, how or why did the site qualify? And I think that was all subject of the investigation, but I think it bears repeating. Why did this site qualify? And the local redevelopment and housing law allows for 8 criteria upon which you can qualify a site. But I'm not going to get into all 8. I'm going to focus on the 2 that were identified as relevant. And that the criteria was A and D, and that has to do with obsolescence of the buildings. The site satisfies criteria B because there have been significant vacancies over the last 2 years, and in fact, it's been in receivership over the past few years and up until the time it was purchased by the present owner. Only one tenant is in the entire space, leaving 90% of the buildings vacant. And the local redevelopment housing law was recently amended to allow municipalities to consider vacancy rates in shopping centers and office buildings and like, because there's a recognition that there are changing market conditions that are occurring in communities that require them to meet certain challenges with respect to adaptively reusing these buildings that are turning mostly vacant and sitting idle in the communities. And, you know, due to the extensive weakness of the office market, and this was noted in Princeton's recent master plan reexamination, the demand for this office space is extremely limited, not only in the community, but in the surrounding area. And while it's possible to rehabilitate the existing buildings, it's not really feasible due to the building's characteristics that I described earlier. There's issues with design, there are mechanical issues, there's a roof replacement that's required, all kinds of investments that exceed whatever the market return would be on the buildings, which is why these parcels are sitting. And so it's not a feasible opportunity to consider whether or not these would ever be reused for office. It's highly unlikely. And so these factors indicate that, you know, there's a concern about the continued functionality and economic viability of the facility. And again, that was reflected in the high vacancy rates. So the decision was that, yes, this in fact does qualify as an area in need of redevelopment. Now, one of the factors that we have to consider is, well, if we're going to declare it an area in need of redevelopment, what would be the best adaptive reuse of the parcel? And to do that, you kind of analyze the bigger global picture of what would be an appropriate alternative use for the site. And so taking into consideration land uses, and I'll return back to that, you have a variety of land uses in the area. To the north and west, you have office space. To the south and east, you have residential uses, including residential attached. You have the Princeton Shopping Center to the south, within walkable distance of the redevelopment area. The area is well served by mass transit. And again, the best exhibit to show that would be this exhibit. And you can see the transit bus lines that run. This is the subject site. This is the shopping center. You have schools. The area is well served by mass transit, and this is important. There's local and regional bus lines with connections to downtown, Princeton University, Dinky train station, Trenton, New York City, and destinations along Route 1. The shopping center offers a variety of conveniences, including a grocery store. You've got pharmacies, retail shops, things that could serve the resident population of the development, and it already does in the surrounding neighborhood. And so when you look at the proximity of the schools, which are highlighted in blue, which are all within walking distance, the recreational facilities that are nearby, the shopping that is nearby, the transit opportunities that exist, you can see, and then the medical facilities that exist in the area, you have residential, not far away. This becomes very viable as a residential alternative for the property in terms of a development option. So when we talk about the redevelopment plan, it was contemplated by and included as part of the Affordable Housing Compliance Mechanism in the December 18, 2019 settlement agreement by and between Princeton and the Fair Share Housing Center. And that was in settlement of the town's litigation to satisfy and establish its fair share for the third round under the Mount Laurel Doctrine. This is a very important component of that plan. In furtherance of that settlement with Fair Share, there have also been separate municipal agreements that have been entered into with Avalon Bay and also with Princeton Pearl for development. And so what the redevelopment plan contemplates are creating two zones. And this is to accommodate two different kinds of development. The first zone is the RSA zone, and that is noted right here. And what that is designed to do is facilitate the development of a 100% affordable, age-restricted rental development containing 80 rental apartments. And that will be limited to residents 55 years of age and older. Funding for this part will be from a number of sources, including the municipality of Princeton and low-income tax credits. And what's significant about the senior development that is being proposed, it is 100% affordable. That means that all 80 units will be subject to COA pricing and affordability controls. Now, why is that significant? If you were to take an inclusionary project that wasn't 100%, a typical rental project requires 15% set aside. That would require 533 housing units to get the same 80 affordable at a 15% set aside for a rental project. By doing a 100% affordable project, there's over 400 units you're not going to have to build to meet your obligation. And I think that's why many times when I meet with my municipal clients, we look for opportunities for 100% municipally sponsored or municipally assisted projects, because the greatest bang for the buck, as we'd like to say, comes from 100%, and that's clearly the case here. So that will be designed for age-restricted seniors. The second zone, which is the IRA zone, is intended to facilitate the development of a privately funded inclusionary development containing 221 dwelling units, including a minimum of 11 COA-worthy apartments, 5 of which, and this is also important, will be reserved for special needs housing. There will be 5 units, 3 bedrooms in each unit. That gives you a COA credit of 15 units. With the other 6, so the remaining balance of 11, that gives you 21 units. So over 100 units, 101 units are being generated towards your compliance plan. And that will be part of what will be presented to the court on next Friday. So this is a significant component of the town of Princeton's compliance with its constitutional obligation. All dwellings in the Thanet Road non-condemnation redevelopment area are to be rental. There are general concept plans, which I will present in a moment. And again, as I had said, the redevelopment plan will supersede the current zoning, which is now Office Research 2, and will provide standards and development guidelines for allowing for the development to occur. Now, the redevelopment plan is also designed to satisfy other requirements under the local redevelopment and housing law. They're all enumerated in the plan document itself. You have to talk about the relationship of the plan to local objectives as to appropriate land uses, density of population, improved traffic and public transportation, public utilities. You need to talk about the proposed land uses and building requirements, which we do. There has to be adequate provision for the temporary and permanent relocation as necessary of residential units, including affordable. That is not the case here, so we don't have to worry about any kind of relocation. And then we need to compare the proposed redevelopment and how it's compliant or consistent with other municipal master plans, as well as the county master plan and state state redevelopment plan. I think that what needs to be emphasized here is how does this plan fit into the overall scope of planning within Princeton, and how does it benefit the community? And I think first and foremost, and I want to go back to the one exhibit that I think really tells the whole story. Just bear with me. And it's this exhibit here. And again, we will have, since this was for introduction, what will happen is at the planning board meeting, we will have a full PowerPoint presentation that will be available to the public. But for purposes of introduction, I'll highlight the important aspects of why we think that this is something that promotes sound planning within Princeton. And this is the, I think, most significant exhibit in the entire document. It's called the Smart Growth Considerations Map. And when you look at the map, you can see that this is the site right here. And because of its proximity and walkability to various important resources that would be available to the tenants, and because of the mix of types of housing that are being promoted here, this makes perfect logical sense from a planning perspective and also from a smart growth perspective. Now, what do we mean by smart growth? I mean, that's a term that gets kicked around a lot, and I'd like the public to understand that when we're talking about smart growth, it's come to represent a way of preserving natural lands, critical environmental habitats. It's designed to protect water and air quality, and it does that by discouraging sprawl and looking to redevelop existing areas that have existing infrastructure, which is exactly what we're doing here. And so there are examples and principles associated with smart growth. You want to promote, for example, a mix of land uses. You want to take advantage of compact design, again, to avoid sprawl, which has been characteristic of New Jersey and has created so many problems. You want to create a range of housing opportunities and choices. You want to create walkable neighborhoods. You want to foster distinctive, attractive communities with strong sense of place. You want to preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty, critical environmental areas, and you want to direct development towards existing communities that have infrastructure, and you want to provide a variety of transportation choices. And when you start to put those principles together, you see how the particular site, the Thanet Road redevelopment area, kind of meets all of those, if not checks most of the boxes that we're talking about here. We're talking about the redevelopment of an existing facility. The focus of the development is to utilize the existing paved areas, buildings, footprints, the existing disturbed areas, to leave the environmentally sensitive areas alone. It will provide, the plan provides for appropriate stormwater measurement measures to be taken. That would include reducing overall stormwater runoff, making sure that there is stormwater quality measures instituted, and that there will be groundwater recharge. All of these would be required under current stormwater regulations anyway, but it's embodied in the plan. The plan provides for community interconnectivity, walkability, pedestrian improvements. It specifically talks to having to integrate this as a walkable community into the area so that people can take advantage of the proximity of the schools, the services, the bus routes. All of that is available there. So this is certainly something that promotes smart growth, and something that as planners we certainly try to recommend and promote as ourselves. As I said earlier, this addresses a significant portion of Princeton's affordable housing obligation. 101 units are going to be generated by this development, and as I described earlier, because a component of this is a senior development that is 100% affordable, you are really taking advantage of the site in a way that you don't have to make up the other units elsewhere in Princeton. And that's significant because you're becoming a developed community. It's becoming more and more difficult to locate areas that are suitable for housing. This is an ideal adaptive reuse for that purpose. As we highlight in the document, the redevelopment is consistent with Princeton, Mercer County and state planning documents. The development actually increases the viability of the local economy. And we say that because the site's strategic location encourages local shopping by the residents that are going to live there. People tend to shop nearby where they live, and because the Princeton Shopping Center is there, it's just a logical fit between where people would probably go to meet most of their shopping needs, certainly with respect to pharmaceutical needs, groceries, and the like. And then again, we think that there's going to be a significant decrease in traffic impact. If you look at the proposed redevelopment plan, it includes a mix of housing, and this mix drastically reduces traffic because you have a significant senior component. Seniors tend to have one vehicle, if that. There's going to be special needs housing. They're generally van pooled. And because of the proximity to mass transit opportunities, the multifamily component of this is going to attract people who are going to want to commute by mass transit. This is going to be very attractive to folks who want to be able to get to a rail station, to the downtown, to Princeton University, wherever they need to go. They have that opportunity there. So again, that would be a significant benefit. And when you compare that to a lot of other uses, there would be significant traffic impacts associated, for example, with a strip center there, which would not probably be appropriate. And the plan calls for improvements. It calls for sensitive design. It incorporates all your requirements to make sure that it is a very upscale development. And then finally, as a component of trying to satisfy your Mount Laurel obligation, it provides for specific needs. You have an aging population, and this is something that is going on throughout the state of New Jersey, where we're finding that people's housing needs obviously change as they age, and we're not able to age in place anymore. We're forced out of our communities. We're forced to look for housing alternatives.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I know that there's a lot of people who are going to want to speak about the plan, so
I'm
can we go
done.
down
This
to
is
the...
my last comment.
Well, I think we want to see the actual
I'm gonna
drawings.
right.
Great, thanks.
And then of course, special needs housing is always a need in a community. So what the plan envisions, and again, this is very conceptual, and there has to be an understanding that when you develop a redevelopment plan and when you do zoning ordinances, until there's a plan in place and an idea of what the regulations are going to be, you don't spend tons of money doing a fully engineered project. So what we do is we look at concepts and we design plans around what's desirable and what works for a particular piece of property. And what you see here is this is the redevelopment site. And this is concept one. Let's get down to this. Okay. And what you'll notice is this is the multifamily component. There will also be probably a mix of townhouses as well as integrated into the development. The RSA zone contemplates a single building for seniors. The building itself will have other types of services within the building to meet the needs of the senior residents. And then their component plan concept one envisions possibly putting townhouses along the roadway here, which is the preferred development of that portion of the property. It would serve as a good transition to the redevelopment that's occurring behind it. And you'll notice a lot of the area is left in a natural state. Now, all of that is going to be subject to all kinds of regulations that affect environmental limitations. There will be all kinds of NJDEP permits that are required. A detailed site plan will have to be submitted that would demonstrate compliance not only with the redevelopment plan, but eventually with all stormwater environmental regulations that are applicable to the project. And then finally, there is a possibility, since we don't know exactly what the delineations are going to be, that there's a possibility that this townhouse development that was fronting on the roadway will go interior into the site. And these are concept plans. All of this would have to be engineered. And the most important thing I want to finally leave with the mayor and council and the public is that this is going to act as an ordinance. There's a lot more that has to happen once this gets adopted, most of which would be the development of a site plan application that would detail all of the engineering that has to go into this development. That application would have to be presented to the planning board for its normal site plan review. It would be reviewed against the redevelopment plan. But importantly, because this is a redevelopment site, there's a very important requirement under 3.8 of the redevelopment plan. Before an applicant can even come before the planning board, there will have to be a formal designation of a redeveloper, and then there would have to be a redevelopment agreement, which would have to be adopted and approved by this body before you can even get to the planning board. So any kind of details that need to be resolved that would obligate the developer to do certain things would be hashed out then and then reflected in the site plan application that would subsequently follow before the planning board. And so, again, the plan was designed to be compliant with the LRHL to provide for an appropriate development that integrates an adaptive reuse into the community in what we think is a very positive way.
Okay, thank you. I guess, John or Michael, could you go through one of these plans and just let people know which of the buildings there are townhomes, which ones are three-story, and just to give people a sense of what this means?
Again, along the roadway, if we look at concept one, which is the preferred, this would be townhouse development right here. This would be townhouses along the frontage. This would be a multifamily building. There would be integrated into this townhouses surrounding it. Again, more stacked units or multifamily. And again, this is all subject to final design and architecturals. I mean, before this could be designed out, the developers, the potential developers need to know what the regulations are going to be. But this is the concept. The senior building is going to be the same on both concepts 1 and 2. It's the red building right here. And there's associated parking, and so that parking demand can be satisfied on the site. We don't foresee any parking shortages with respect to the redevelopment plan. Again, we're anticipating less traffic demand as a result of this adaptive reuse of the property. Did I miss anything?
I think you covered a lot of ground there. I would just add that I want to piggyback on what you were just saying about the traffic generation. A benefit is that it's not an office use as it had originally been, so you're not having that same heavy impact on rush hour traffic in the morning and in the evening. I wanted to just sort of add to your presentation by saying, and we think this is an exciting concept in terms of redevelopment for this section of Princeton, basically in 2 areas. From the environmental standpoint, it is redeveloping a site that's already been developed, and the new construction would be pretty much where there's already impervious coverage, where the building and parking lots are currently. The fact is that the site right now is obsolete in terms of its use because it's been very difficult to find any tenants for the 2 office buildings, and the physical condition of the site, it is in a state of deterioration. So the idea that it could find a new use that would bring people into this site, and we are also pretty excited that, as I said, the new construction would be limited to the area of the site that was already built upon, so that the green areas, a lot of the areas around the periphery of the site and the environmentally sensitive areas would be preserved. The other thing is that I really feel it's a good example of smart growth and the way we want to develop in Princeton, because it's basically becomes a component of what we have in Harrison Street, the corridor of Harrison Street, which is a transit corridor, as John mentioned, and it has a mix of uses up and down the corridor, certainly the Princeton Shopping Center, professional services, office and research buildings nearby. So there's the possibility that people that live in this area could walk to work, could walk to services, could walk to shopping, take their bicycles, other modes of transportation, hopefully non-motorized, and it at least gives you the option. So we're pretty excited about that. It's a central location within the municipality. And we also think there's good opportunities for connectivity, for connections to paths and regional trails, and pedestrian and bicycle accommodation that we want to build in the future. This could really be a hub for that kind of activity. We also think it's sensitive to some of the nearby residential areas. It's a good transition from the residential areas largely to the east of the site to the commercial areas going towards Harrison Street, the Harrison Street corridor. So there's lots of reasons that John mentioned that the planning staff feels pretty excited about. We think this is a smart way to go.
Just to emphasize, I mean, if you look at the development regulations, total impervious coverage cannot exceed 55%. That's quite constrained, and that reflects the fact, as Michael has said, that we're taking advantage of the existing developed areas. And in my experience, 55% is pretty low for a development like this, and that's reflective, again, of the desire to maintain the site and use only the disturbed areas and keep it the way it is for the most part and make it an appropriate transition.
Okay, thank you. We can either pause and take questions or do all the presentations and then do questions. So do you have one question? Okay, go ahead.
John, am I understanding that you'll be doing a presentation to the planning board as well? Can I ask, I found it as somebody who does not have a tremendous amount of experience looking at plans, each map has its own orientation.
No, it
If,
will all be.
if it could be, when you're doing the next presentation, change so that every single map is
Yes.
oriented the same way, that would just cognitively make it so much easier.
I agree. This was for introduction. I get it. That's easily done.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question about the last point you were making about impervious coverage.
Yes.
So we appear to have 3 lots here, or at least we have 2 with one that's breaking the larger lot in 2. And when you talk about a 55% impervious limit, are you saying that the 55% would be calculated across the 2 IRA
The,
pieces, or would it be applied in each piece individually?
the RSA has its own maximum permitted impervious coverage of 75%, and maximum permitted building coverage shall not exceed 40, and that reflects the fact that that's a 2.1 acre parcel. For the IRA zone, which is the inclusionary residential development, it would be for the combination of all.
Okay, so they would be counting all that open space that's on the lot closer to Terhune towards their...
That's how I believe it's being contemplated.
Could you speak up louder, please?
That is how I believe it's being calculated, yes.
Are there any questions at this point? We can come back if there are more questions, and we can continue on with the presentation. So I want to thank you, turn it over to Mr. DeShield for the, to run us through the financials.
Thank you, Mayor. What I'd like to do is just give you an overview of the financing of these projects. As indicated, there are 2 projects here, one being the Avalon Bay site, which is the market rate project. That project, if we look at that project, it will be a pilot on that project. Those revenues will be used to pay debt service for the municipal contribution that we will make towards the senior project to allow us to build that project. And I'm just going to walk you through the financing of that. We'll start with the Avalon Bay project. We estimate the rents on that project will be about $6.9 million. From that, we estimate that at 11% pilot, that will give us $759,000 in revenue that can be applied towards the debt service for the contribution we're making on the senior project. In addition, the senior project itself, we're projecting to have an estimated rents of $790,000 at the 6.28%, which is the HMFA minimum pilot. And that's the number I used here for this analysis. That would generate $49,000. As you can see, we'd be bringing in a total revenue of $809,000 on an annual basis. And what we'll do with that revenue is pay for the cost of what we're going to be contributing towards the project to allow for the 100% senior project. We estimate our obligation, our contribution to the project will be $8 million. The debt service on that $8 million over 30 years is about $515,000. So as you can see, if you look at the revenue that we're bringing in, there will be a balance of $294,000 that could be used to provide other municipal services, pay for costs in addition to any other of our affordable housing costs. But this is to give you an overview of what the financing can look like. The one thing I do want to point out, the pilot estimates that we're using here are very conservative. In fact, if you look at the Avalon Bay project, this is based on our conservative estimate. My discussions, at least preliminary, with the developer of Avalon Bay, they think that it probably will come in more in the 800,000, but we want to do this to be conservative. Have any questions?
I know that in some of the other financial information I've seen, the pilot level for the senior project was estimated to be higher than the minimum, I think on the basis that senior projects have less operating costs or something like that. Do you have any information about what would be a typical pilot for a senior project specifically?
The 6.28% is the percentage you usually see on any affordable housing project that is financed through HMFA. So that's typical. It doesn't mean that you cannot try to negotiate higher than that, but that's typical what you'll see with HMFA sponsored financing.
Are there any questions for Mr. DeShield at this point?
I'm just wondering what the extent of our other financial obligations to the project on top of the $8 million financing. Are we exposed to any additional level of risk, or is that the maximum?
It may not be the maximum. Only this. We are scheduled to do $8 million. I know there's some discussion if there are additional things that we'd like in the project that are above what the developer can do. We would have to negotiate with them to determine our portion of it may go up. And again, the developer is actually working on additional financing. It could be lower. It could be slightly, and again, this is an estimate, could be slightly above, but our maximum is roughly around the $8 million.
Yeah, I have a question. So can you just explain, when we did the MOU showed that it was a $17 million project, and can you just explain how the Pearl obligation will be covered by Pearl and what our responsibility is as a municipality?
I also wanted to say that Lara Schwager's here too, and so you are up next anyway to come talk, and maybe it makes sense to do the transition here.
Good evening.
Let's make sure you're speaking right in the mic so people can hear you.
Sure. So the question, I think, was the project is estimated at $17 million, and why do we think it's going to be capped at $8 million? I think roughly that's the question.
Speak more to the mic, please.
All right, here we go. I'll use my outside voice.
Right.
That's fine. So I think the question was, it's $17 million is the potential total cost of the project, and why is the municipality only showing $8 million, and what's that risk between there? So the difference is made up of two different types of funding sources. So we're going to be using what they call 4% low-income housing tax credits for the project. Unlike the 9% on the other site the municipality is working on in town, the 4% is a non-competitive tax credit. So it's a bond that's issued by NJHMFA, the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, and so it's non-competitive. So they're out there, they're available. I've spoken to the agency. They have plenty of bond capacity. We do not see any issues in having the tax credits for this project. The other source of financing, which is also allowed by statute by NJHMFA, is their permanent mortgage. So we're estimating... The permanent mortgage? Yes. So the permanent mortgage is estimated about $4 million on the project. So again, that's not a at-risk source. Will apply. We've been a little conservative on what that rate is right now. So that can actually increase if the rates stay as low as they are today. But given we're not going to build this for another year and a half or so, we've added a little fluff into that number. So those two sources of funds are pretty well committed. There's some other soft funds that we have available to us for some special needs dollars, and that will range anywhere from about $375,000 to about close to $600,000. The municipality gets the full benefit of those sources, so any additional dollars that we get into the project reduces your $8 million. In addition, there's two other sources of financing that I've committed to assisting the municipality with. Those two are something called Federal Home Loan Bank of New York, which is specifically for affordable housing. With the donated nature of the project, that gives us a good scoring for that. So we'll look to submit for those. Those could be $1 million or $2 million worth of money. And then the other one is what they call county home dollars. County home dollars. Those are HUD dollars. And so we'll look, those will be a lower amount, probably in the couple $100,000 range, but we'll look to submit for those as well. So there's lots of other sources that are available. Those sources cannot be applied for until such time as we have our site plan approval and some of our other funding commitments in place, but they're all things that we will be working toward to reduce the municipal's obligation.
And one other question. So what happens if cost overruns when you're developing, when you're building? Who has to pay for that?
So we have a significant contingency. So when we do this, the banks and everyone requires us to hold contingencies on the project. We have roughly about a $700,000 contingency. This isn't a complicated site, doesn't have a lot of environmental issues or infrastructure requirements. It's built on a already improved site. Based on what we estimate and the contingency that we're required to hold, we do not expect that. We've never had that issue before, frankly, because we have such large contingencies that are required by the agencies.
Okay, 700,000. Okay.
So
The requirement of us to provide these are in our MOU. So the requirement for us to go forward and look at some of these other sources are actually in our affordable housing agreement with the municipality.
right, and when we have, we're going to be speaking a lot about the financials on the Avalon Bay side on February 10th, and if things are ready, I'd like to be able to present them jointly at our next meeting, but we'll see where we are with getting everything down on paper.
I would just direct everyone, Exhibit B in the agreement with Pearl, the Affordable Housing Agreement, lays out those funding sources if anyone wants to take a look.
Thank you.
Ours is
from-
called the Affordable Housing Agreement.
Is that from December 18th?
Yep.
Mayor. So one of the questions that I had, thanks for coming tonight and for answering questions.
No problem.
Appreciate that. And good to meet you again. So does it matter to you whether Avalon Bay hands you a shovel-ready site, or does your financing, I know it's only a parking lot, there's not a building there, but do your financial considerations include having to start from that parking lot, or are you and when I asked this question before, I said you were going to negotiate with Avalon Bay, so I just want to make sure that is something that, you're sure about, they're sure about, and there aren't all of a sudden costs that were unanticipated and potentially problematic.
Correct. At this point in time, we've made estimates, I would say on a more conservative basis on the site, because we don't know how Avalon's going to leave the site exactly. So the hope is that those will go down. We're also investigating with them joint stormwater, which would also help our overall costs when you do a regional basin, in this case it'll be underground, but a regional basin, those costs are shared, and therefore, those costs of the affordable project will actually be reduced. So the benefit of us working closely together is that the municipality will benefit and garner those cost savings as we do that. As part of our affordable housing agreement, I'm required to come back to the municipality, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly, but I think either 60 or 90 days after we finalize a plan. At that point, I'll know all the requirements the municipality would like us to put in the building and what Avalon's going to be doing on the demolition of the site, and I'm required to come back and give you a final number. If it's a good number, you'll be happy. If it's not a good number, we'll discuss, what happens and maybe what we take in and take out of the project.
I'm sorry, you wouldn't anticipate that would require a contribution of more than the $8 million or not?
It depends on what you like. How far are we going to go with what do we want the net zero to be? Like how 13 sprinkler, all those things, which are things, some of which we have in the budget, some of which we don't. Those are all negotiations. The benefit of working with a developer that's done this before is I'm on your side of the table. So I'm here to basically walk you through the financials, tell you where they sit, the good, the bad, and the ugly, what we can do, and then as a group we make decisions. And that's the way that I work with my municipalities. You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Lara at this time?
Did you,
Right.
Mayor, want me to give a little bit of background
Oh,
on
yeah.
who we are? I know I
Yes,
came in,
please.
I kind of came in at the end of my presentation. instead of
Right,
the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah, no, please, go ahead.
Again, can I use this in turn? You guys know me, they don't. Does this work? Does this work? Nope. It does. Okay. Hi. I'm sorry. I had my back to you. So my name is Lara Schwager. I'm a vice president with Pearl. I handle the development for our New Jersey and Pennsylvania markets. Pearl is a multifamily developer which specializes in tax credit affordable housing. That's what we do. I run the New Jersey office, but we are based in Cleveland. We develop in 7 different states across the country and have about 6,000 apartment homes throughout the country. Not only are we a development company, but we're also a construction company, so we build all of our projects, and we're also an owner-manager of our projects. So the benefit, I like to say, for the municipalities and the residents is it's kind of like one shop stopping. We're here from beginning until end. And that means, if something goes sideways or something, my construction guys are working at the wrong time of the morning, the mayor's got my number and I would expect a phone call. That's the benefit of having one group that works from beginning to end on a project. And we hold all of our projects generally for the 30-year or depending on the affordability, sometimes 45-year affordability control period. So that's just a little bit about Pearl and who we are. You've heard we're super excited about being in Princeton. We're super excited about this project. I think having the senior community is a much needed addition to Princeton as a community. And, we're happy to be here and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thanks. Any other questions from council for anybody at this point? Or are we ready to open it up to the public then? Okay, so we have a sign-up sheet. So we're going to start with the sign-up sheet, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak. So first up is Carol Golden. Oh, Carol had to leave. All right. Drew's next. Drew Dyson.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Drew Dyson. I'm the Executive Director of the Princeton Senior Resource Center, and I'm here simply to support the senior-specific affordable housing commitment that the council has made. And there's a couple reasons that I want to highlight in doing that. First, we all know that the 65 plus demographic is the fastest growing, not only nationally, but specifically in New Jersey and in this community. It's the largest growing population. We know that from the Harvard Center on Housing Studies that the older adults over 65 is going to grow by 40 million people in the next 30 years. Almost double what it currently is, and we need to be prepared for that. And so we want to highlight, and I want to say thank you for the commitment to do that. The other thing I want to say is that Princeton was designated as an age-friendly community by the AARP and the World Health Organization in partnership with PSRC and the council and many members of the community to receive that designation as one of the first communities in the nation to do so. And in the report that we developed together, the organization, PSRC, again, council members, and was affirmed and highlighted in this, calls for in priority number 1, goal A, which is found on page 28 of the document, which is on our website if you don't have it or you'd like to review it. But priority 1, goal A, is to increase the number of affordable housing units for older adult residents to be able to age in place. And so we made that commitment together as a community almost 5 years ago, and I really just want to say thank you for your willingness to do that. Affordable senior housing, and particularly concentrated developments, allow for a couple specific things. They allow for design modifications that are specific universal design applications to help older adults to age in place. They allow for specific commitments to accessibility as it relates to not only accessibility and design, but also in terms of public transportation options that were highlighted. It allows for services and amenities to be tailored for older adults, and there's very specific needs that come with that, including some things that aren't often thought about. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is to have some senior advising people in regards to the communities that are formed. So one of the things that's not often thought about is open spaces and playgrounds in senior housing developments. The reason for that is because you want seniors to be comfortable to host their grandchildren and to have grandchildren who are part of that community. So that's one of the things, one of the trends across the nation in senior housing. So I would encourage you to consult with some senior developers as we move forward with this plan. So again, I want to say thank you, to applaud the council for the intent of this plan, and to really challenge us together as a community to continue our longstanding commitment to senior housing that led to Princeton being designated as one of the first internationally communities that are age-friendly by the World Health Organization and the AARP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Mr. Lance Liverman.
I do not miss sitting up there. I just want to thank you guys so much. I mean, it is beautiful to have you guys serve the community. I'm not speaking as a member of the Senior Resource Center or as an Affordable Housing Board member. I'm just speaking as a homeowner and property owner in Princeton. And I would like to say that I think this is a beautiful plan. I think it's well thought out. I love to see the finance part that was discussed by Mr. DeShield. I think it's a plan that brings families along with seniors to put them to make it work for all groups. I know that I sat for about a year across from Fair Share in regard to trying to negotiate many items. And I think that this would really be a gem to have in your bag. So I just want to commend you, press on, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Kate Warren?
Good evening, and my condolences to all of you. Bob's passing. I'm talking as Kate Warren, not having to do with the Affordable Housing Board. I'm not here representing them. And I just basically have some questions. I think this looks great. Want to look at the financials, but a lot of the things I clicked off here, and I only had a brief read, so maybe I'll come back, but I don't know. But I don't want to hold everybody up, so let me just get to the most important. I see that by law you're allowed to give tax abatements and tax exemptions, and I'm just wondering if any of those were afforded to Avalon Bay.
Yes.
The abatement?
It's basically a pilot, so it's a payment
That's
in lieu
what
of
the
taxes.
Well, okay, so that takes care, all right. And is 11% is that the average 11% pilot for a project like this?
It's not the average. The 11% was came about through negotiations in our mediation and the court process. So that's what makes this unique. Is this pilot agreement came through part of our negotiation both with Fair Share and the developer. So that's why you'll see the 11% there.
Okay. Because what concerns me about that is, and it may be different because it's a different type of development, but we, municipality, as far as I understand, and I haven't checked the number in quite a while, what we anticipated from the pilot from the Palmer Square units, most of them were turned to rentals when they couldn't sell them, is nowhere near what the town expected to receive. So I don't know about Avalon, they're pretty full all the time, but it is based on rentals, right? And for a rental project, it's my understanding also it's beneficial to the owner to have some units empty, because then your tax rate, you don't pay as much taxes. So I don't know if it's 100%. And I was glad to see that none of the land that was donated from Avalon sits in the environmentally sensitive area, as we saw in the land-wind switch. And I just heard the Pearl representative say that they would hold the property for the term of the deed restriction, which was 30 or 45 years. So I don't, but we also have that clause, or until the municipality releases it. So I was just wondering if that was discussed. Would they hold it in perpetuity? Will they sell it at a specific time, and it has that time been determined that it would be 30 years? Is it a 45-year? So I'm just interested to know that.
My sense is that those details will get worked out in the redeveloper agreement, which we have not struck yet.
Okay, because I know in working with Avalon Bay here, nationwide, they typically turn over their units after 12 years. And then another clarifying question for me is on page... It has to do with the ability for both Pearl and Avalon to submit their projects simultaneously, the
preliminary and final site plans?
Yeah. And that caused some problems the last time we were dealing with Avalon Bay. So I'm just wondering, was that negotiated or is that standard? Because I know it has to do with funding sources.
Mr. Place, do you want to speak to that? I think it's not unusual.
That was specific to the RSA zone, because it's very important for the financing for the senior project that they be able to do that. The municipal land use law permits simultaneous applications. And so what it does is it greatly accelerates the process, and it allows you to review all the details up front, rather than having a multi-stage process that costs a lot more money and defeats the purposes of trying to get affordable housing constructed. And there are timeframes also that the town of Princeton will be bound by in terms of the ultimate compliance plan that will come out of the fairness hearing that's going to take place next Friday.
I understand most of that, and I'm just going by our history.
I'm going to ask Michael to respond.
Yeah,
just
I think
about
Michael...
like in Princeton,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what?
I think the question is it unusual to do the preliminary and final site plan
Oh, no,
together?
that's actually pretty common. Most of our applications, we do preliminary and final site plan review. It's permitted under the municipal land use law. It's pretty standard.
Yeah, I understand that, but I also understand that that caused a lot of problems the last time with the major construction here, and left a lot of people. It was feeling it was rushed through, and that there wasn't time to really read and digest and comment. So I understand it's part of the law, but I didn't know if that was negotiated, and maybe you had talked to Avalon to see if that was not the case for the rental units. I understand why it would be the case for the seniors.
When you say last time, which
I'm
project
talking
are
about
you
the
referring
Avalon Bay across the street.
I think one difference with this is that because it's redevelopment, we already have the concept plans out in the community. So in some ways, it's almost like a concept review that's out there for a period of time. So, hopefully there'll be feedback, and whatever feedback we get, we can deliver back to Avalon Bay and make adjustments based on, concerns and input that we hear.
I thought that I had written into the agreement or my suggestion was that preliminary and final site plan review could be requested, but that the municipality was free to decline that request. I don't know if that's still in, but I had written
That was
in.
deleted.
Okay.
Well, then I wasn't the only one that had the concerns.
But I'd say the municipality always has the right to require both if it wants it to. It just usually, logistically, it makes more sense to do it all at once.
And I understand all of that. And I'm really just speaking from having dealt with this personally. And then the other, I wanted to congratulate you from pages 21 on, where you talk about it will be solar ready. Other aspects of the climate action plan have been addressed here, and I really appreciate that you were able to get that into the redevelopment plan. If I have other questions, I'll come back, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Molly Jones?
Hello, I'm Molly Jones, Executive Director of Sustainable Princeton. I'm also a resident, but I'm here as Executive Director tonight. So first and foremost, I wanted to congratulate you, as Kate mentioned, on including that the developer will be working with the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready program for the senior housing. That's really a great step on the climate action plan, so kudos to all of you. Lowering the parking requirements, another positive. Using some of the existing infrastructure, so that limits emissions from the added resources to create new infrastructure, and really just using the smart growth principles. So all steps in a positive direction. On the Avalon Bay project, it seems like we're also doing good things by their commitment to make that facility solar ready. Hopefully they'll take the step of actually putting the array on there. Also really being focused on traffic calming, the pedestrian elements, covered bike parking. So definitely steps in the right direction. We do hope that, I know we're talking about the pervious surfaces. It does look like if some of those townhouses are put out by the road on Terhune, that actually isn't currently pervious surfaces, so that we just remain fully conscious if there's the removal of any mature tree growth, that we really think very deeply about what that's going to do water-wise. We know that we have huge problems out on Terhune Road with kind of downstream, literally. And so just want to remain conscious that any removal of those trees is going to have impacts on the stormwater. So all in all, just wanted to applaud all of you for making great steps in the right direction in progress aligned with the climate action plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Leighton Newland? And Leighton's the last one to have signed up, so after Leighton, we'll have a free-for-all.
Good evening. Just a general statement, Leighton Newland as Leighton Newland, resident. It was 1969 when Ethel Lawrence, a 62-year-old Mount Laurel resident, organized an effort to petition Mount Laurel Zoning Board to allow the development of an affordable apartment complex. When township officials, organized an effort to petition Mount Laurel Zoning Board to allow the development of affordable housing complex. When township officials resisted, she found an attorney and joined forces with the Southern Burlington County NAACP and the Camden County NAACP to file a class action lawsuit against the township. The claim, Mount Laurel was purposely excluding low and moderate income families from living there through exclusionary zoning. In order for Princeton to experience smart growth, it is critical that the growth must be across all socioeconomic sectors and income levels. It must include an abundance of rental units on all levels, and those units must be spread across all neighborhoods, including the western part of our town. It is natural that those neighborhoods within close proximity to the central business district and the shopping center district will have greater density because real vibrancy and economic development relies on the energy and excitement of people of all ages being in close proximity to where they work, find entertainment, and access services that sustain and enrich their daily lives. Yes, smart growth equals greater density, but what we cannot afford is for Princeton to grow in such a way that we just create a more dense, gated community that has the haves and have-nots and nobodies in between. Our schools, no matter how good they are, will be unable to offer a quality of life enhancing education because they simply will not have enough diversity to reflect the real world and its fast-changing racial environment and structure. In other words, Princeton will no longer be able to hide in plain sight. I don't have all the answers, but I didn't run for council. I am not in leadership, but you all did and are. So whatever you do, know that our futures are inextricably tied to the decisions that you will make. I hope you all have done your homework on the fair share housing decisions and issues, because smart growth starts now. For those of us who remember, who are old enough to remember, it is time for us to be like Wyatt Earp. Be brave, courageous, and bold. Long live his fame, and long live his glory. And like Princeton, long may the story be told, with sincere and great appreciation for all you do.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you. Joel Schwartz, Armour Road. Thank you all for all your hard work. I have a few questions rather than comments. First, following up on the question that Kate Warren raised and a comment made by you, Mayor Lempert. If the
Can you make sure you speak in the mic so everybody can hear you?
Thank you. I appreciate that. If the redevelopment plan as proposed tonight is approved on the 10th of February, for argument's sake, and given that the MOU with Avalon is already executed, if the applicant, either Avalon or Pearl, submits a plan which is, again, for the sake of argument, essentially identical to Concept 1 or Concept 2, is the planning board obligated to approve that plan? Or is the planning board free to essentially say, well, it's an interesting plan, has some merit, but we'd actually like to see a different plan? One of the reasons I asked that is you referred to the concept plan, Mayor, a few moments ago as having been out there, and therefore by the time it gets to the planning board, presumably some people will have seen it. So the question is, to what extent is the planning board bound by the concepts that are in these documents?
I think that's a legal question, so I'm going to ask our lawyer to respond to that.
I can respond and can give you the more generalized response, which is that setting aside what might be in the MOU, this is no different ultimately than any other site plan application. The planning board reviews it against the applicable standards, in this case the ones that are set forth in the redevelopment plan, and it will have no more and no less discretion than it would have with any other kind of site plan application. Now, what I don't have sitting in front of me is the MOU, but in general, a fully conforming plan, the planning board has the ability to work with applicants to make changes, but no planning board can outright deny a plan that conforms fully to all of the zoning and site plan requirements.
I appreciate that answer. The reason I ask that, in a conventional situation that is not capital R redevelopment, if an applicant submits a conforming plan, it's very hard for the approving land use board to deny it. The reason municipalities use the redevelopment statute is so that they can negotiate with the developer. So you're using the redevelopment statute, which gives you an opportunity that you usually don't have in a conventional land use application. You can negotiate with the developer and say, I know you might want to have done that plan. We had something else in mind. So I'm really asking a practical question. I appreciate the legal question. I think we know that that's what the legal fact is. I'm wondering to what extent you all have effectively bought into the concept plans that are on the table, or whether you intend for there to be some, give and take, which you are 100% entitled to, being as how this is a redevelopment.
Well, the next step for this is the planning board. So there's been a design subcommittee as part of the council that has been working with Avalon Bay on this plan, and it'll go to the planning board, and we always want to hear from our planning board their opinions and their input, and then it'll come back to council. I don't know if I'm answering your question the way, I'm not sure exactly what you want me to say, or what your question is getting at. I mean, it's like we are having a give and take with them, and it's going to go to the planning board, and there'll be a further discussion there before it comes back to council.
In fairness, Mayor, I'll leave it as an open question because I don't want to take up everyone's time tonight. The real question is to what extent has the council essentially signed off on the concept plans? And we don't have to answer that tonight. It's an open question. I know you just said that there will be some give and take. You'll look at some things. So I'm going to suggest we leave that as an open question out there. To what extent you are essentially invested or in agreement with the concept plans that are on the table. I'm not asking you for an answer tonight.
Well, I want to make sure we do answer it if there's an answer. Did you?
There's an answer. I don't know if it's the full answer that Mr. Schwartz is looking for, but the Avalon Bay MOU has concept plans attached to it, and it specifically requires Avalon Bay. I mean, it states the layout of the Avalon Bay development and location of the parcel shall be consistent with the concept plans attached hereto is Exhibit A. That's Exhibit A to the Memorandum of Understanding. There are some very specific requirements in the MOU itself with respect to some of the essentials of that plan. Now, the council does not control the planning board. The planning board is not under an obligation to approve what the concept plan that is attached to the MOU, but Avalon Bay is obligated to submit something that is consistent with that concept plan.
I'd like to just make a couple of comments. One is that in our conversations with Avalon Bay, we specifically discussed the fact that the zoning standards that are in this redevelopment plan are not totally constraining. So they asked for that both to be able to respond to public comment as well as to be able to have some flexibility as their engineering of the site proceeds. So we were happy to hear that they were interested in being able to respond to public comment, and I think that the planning board hearing next week would be a great opportunity to have some input, realizing at the same time that it's really a planning board hearing to consider whether the plan is consistent with the master plan, and it's not a concept review,
right,
which would be something different. So
I appreciate that answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to also mention that we made in the negotiations some suggestions that I think would have improved the site plan, and you're getting some pushback on the basis of the ideas being cost generative. And the fact that we're in a redevelopment does not eliminate that consideration from what we have to be concerned with. So that's just another way in which we're constrained.
Point well taken. Let me give you one example of a threshold issue, why I asked specifically about this particular concept plan. In this concept plan, there are no streets on the site. Princeton is a community that for the last 300 years has developed on the basis of streets and roads and public spaces. So the concept plan is a significant anomaly in terms of 300 years of planning and development in the town of Princeton. Most people in this town live on a street, and this town is all about streets. It's why people come here on the weekends to walk around. This plan is a significant departure from that. And so I'll leave you with this open question. A double-sided open question. Have you bought into the idea that in this redevelopment there's no need for streets? Have you bought into the idea that in this redevelopment everyone should front on a parking lot. I have it's an open question. I don't want to take up your time. I want to ask you a few very short questions. I'm sorry,
Well, I
Mayor.
was going to just respond to that. That is mentioned in the plan, and the plan speaks to that because that was part of our conversations. So obviously there's an existing road there that's a cul-de-sac, and there's surrounding properties, and there's across the street, there's potential for connection to the shopping center, which would give people a shortcut who are coming up Terhune, especially if it was a pedestrian. I mean, I'm considering streets both for cars and for people, not in a car. But a lot of the connections require the cooperation of neighboring properties because there's no point in having a street that goes to the edge of your property that doesn't connect. So there's language in the plan that talks about how those connections will be pursued, but we couldn't draw them into the plan at this point because it requires negotiations not just with Avalon Bay, but with their neighbors that will connect out to an existing road. But that has been part of our conversation and something we're very interested in pursuing.
Thank you. Forgive me for having not been more clear. I was referring to streets and roads within the 15 acres. I can't think of another example in the entire town, former township and former borough, the entire town of Princeton, where a 15-acre residential community has everyone fronting on a parking lot rather than fronting on a street. My question was really about streets and roads on the 15 acres. Please forgive me if I just jump ahead. I want to ask a couple really quick questions. The financial information that was presented tonight was not in the packet. When will all that information be made publicly available?
We can post what was presented tonight. We can put it up on the website tomorrow. And then there'll be more detailed financial information, certainly for the 10th, if not before then.
Specifically, the most important piece of information that Mr. Shields presented was that the structure of all the financing is based on the $6.9 million projected rental revenue. Will you present some backup as to where that number comes from? Because everything is built on that number. If that number has any issues, then everything that follows from it has issues. Second thing is, when you present that information, it would be wonderful if you could present information why the pilot is 11% and not, say, 15%. 11% effectively means that Avalon pays a significantly lower amount of property tax. So I'd like just some explanation what Avalon is getting to, in return for, in effect, a 30 or 40% decrease in their property tax burden. 2 or 3 very quick questions. This is one for Laura Schwager. Am I taking I'm next. Okay, thanks. So Ms. Schwager said that the 4%, referred to the 4% financing. My question is that 4% financing package, which is that subject to inclusionary review by the HMFA? Short version of what inclusionary review means, HMFA examines an application to decide should public money be given to this project, or could this project actually move ahead without needing HMFA or other forms of public support?
So the inclusionary review is much more than that. Sorry, there you go. So the inclusionary review is much more than that. And we've been talking to NJHMFA about that. With the $8 million contribution from the municipality, there's no doubt that given my history and experience, including an inclusionary review that I did on a project up the street in Montgomery, I think we'll be fine. It's based on contribution, and the municipality's contribution far exceeds what would be concerned.
If for any reason the HMFA money is not available, if for any reason, can you hear me okay? If for any reason the HMFA money is not available, or for any reason the project costs more than $17 million, that's in Appendix B of the agreement with you, who pays the overage?
So as we talked about at the beginning, my discussions with the municipality and the $8 million goes a lot to what is inside the building, what kind of extras. We've budgeted the building based on New Jersey NJHMFA standards, which is already an enterprise green, which is another energy efficient building. and Energy Star housing. So the building's been already budgeted and built, and we've built this building. We just finished one in Freehold. So we've built this building, before, as I said, had 6,000 units across the country, and we have our own construction company. So we have a good feeling about how these buildings get built, and we have a significant contingency in all of our projects. Can I guarantee that when I give the final numbers to the municipality, that they're going to be a little bit different here and there? I've been pretty conservative in my estimates, but I can't promise, as we've discussed with them, if they ask for something very specific that we don't have in the buildings, it might be a little bit more.
So I take your answer to mean that if it costs more than 17 million, the town has to pay for it. Please understand, I understand what you just said. When I started doing what I do for a living, I didn't have any white hair. So I've been a builder and a developer for 40 years. I understand how, despite my best homework, sometimes things cost more than I thought they were starting out. So
we've provided a pretty conservative estimate to the municipality. Again, I sit on the side of the municipality, so the decisions that will be made, if the budget comes in over, there will be decisions that will be discussed from the municipality, and we can make a decision as a group as to whether they want to cut the scope of the project to bring it more in line. It's not a cut or dry answer because there's many moving parts between here and there.
Okay, thank you. Last question. There's an existing stormwater basin out there that serve the 2,000 office buildings in the parking lot. Are both your project and the Avalon project going to be served by that existing stormwater basin?
We have not designed the overall stormwater infrastructure for the project yet because we don't have an approved plan. So as soon as the overall plan is set in place, then we'll begin engineering the project, and I'll be able to answer. The stormwater in this area is overseen by the DRCC, so there'll be very specific discussions with them on what's going to be required as it relates to stormwater.
Do I take your answer to mean that the $17 million includes a reasonable amount of money to pay for what you just described?
So my portion of what's described, yes.
Yes. Okay, so there's enough money. In other words, the $17 million is not based on using the existing basin.
No, I'm making an assumption on my property because it's 2.1 acres that we're using underground basins for that.
Okay, last question. Sorry, I said last, I lied. It says the pilot...
You said last, you're done in my book.
You only get two last questions.
I'm going to only take one more last. It says the pilot set at 6.28% for the senior project. My understanding is that there are projects elsewhere in the state that pay more than that. The more money those projects pay in pilot, the better it is, the better the host municipality is. So is there any reason why that 6.28 can't be raised?
So what you're referring to is that the standard redevelopment pilot is generally or can be higher than the 6.28. NJHMF, the pilot for the affordable housing is a NJHMFA statute pilot, which has a 6.28% max when you look at all the competitive points that they give for the project on the competitive score. It's the 6.28 that's used as the standard. In fact, I have some towns that are as low as 1%. So in this case...
You have no towns that are higher than 6.28?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Ginny Bryant. I'm a Princeton resident and parent of a 15-year-old child with a developmental disability. My take on the redevelopment plan is maybe a little bit different than we've heard earlier tonight. And what some people might not know is that most people with a disability will become a low-income family of one at age 18. People with disabilities obviously need affordable housing. So I'm pretty new to this housing conversation. And I know some of the conversations, some of the factors, and some of the considerations. What I don't know is this. If the settlement agreement is perfect or not, I don't know if the housing plan could be better or it should be better. But what I do know is that the settlement agreement was hard fought and hard won. And it came on the heels of Judge Jacobson's order, which came as a result of litigation, which came as a result of a long history of noncompliance with law. All that is to say, this plan might not be perfect or the best, but it's absolutely a step in the right direction, and I would say that it's very much long overdue. This matter is urgent. There's real people with real lives who can't be living in this community because we don't have affordable housing for them. in the way that we've always done things. So I urge the council to fully support the redevelopment plan and move it forward. Again, we're making great steps in the right direction. Maybe it's not perfect, but maybe the goal is like progress, not perfection at this point. Like, this is urgent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I live at 388 Terhune, which is on the corner of Thanet Drive and Terhune, and I like smart growth too, so I'm not going to comment on the site plan, but I would really like to make a plea that you think in context of the neighborhood. As I've been begging for traffic calming on Terhune for 2 decades, we've lived here almost 3, that right now the sidewalk alongside of Terhune is completely degraded. The electrical company removed trees, and there are big pits with standing water. And from a homeowner's perspective, what's happening is in my backyard, you're going to build a bunch of rental properties. So, but they get tax abatements. Will we? What, the people on Terhune, how can we not worry? So if these are going to go up, I believe in fair housing, but for God's sake, think of the context. Think about the neighbors. It's just getting worse and worse there. You've done nothing all these years to improve the conditions on Terhune. It's not fair, and I don't understand it. And the other thing is, please create an ordinance so that gas-powered leaf blowers are not used on that property. Sometime in early September this summer, before any leaves had fallen, there were leaf blowers in that stupid property behind us from 8 o'clock lawn crews, from 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. So it's not the housing, it's all the crap that comes with it. Make sure the lights face into the housing development, not out to us. There's just a lot of hassle. So please remember the context and the other taxpayers. Thank
Janet,
you.
if you read, I don't know if you've read through the redevelopment plan yet, but in several sections it's mentioned that Avalon will be working on traffic calming and pedestrian improvements, some of the things that we've been discussing for a long time. So that has been discussed, and it's an ongoing discussion, and I think you will see some positive things in that specific regard.
I
don't know what the leaf blowers.
Please add quiet landscaping to the plan, or do something about it townwide. It's appalling. Other towns have done it. We don't need that shit. Their office properties are the worst. So have mercy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask for clarification on one part, since our engineer is here, Deanna? Was Terhune one of the roads that was on the traffic calming priority list? My recollection is that it was.
Unfortunately, our section of Terhune that Janet was, all of Terhune is on the traffic calming list, and it ends right at our section, which is something I've been meaning to bring up, because given the development that is being put in there, it seems most unfortunate that that priority would end right at the very point where it's needed. So
that's something I think we can work with the developer on. I think there's consensus among us that that intersection, Terhune crossing there, is going to be a very high priority. So Janet, thank you for bringing that up.
Good evening, Kristen Applegate. I live at 53 Governor's Lane. I'm here in front of you many times, but I'm here as a Princeton resident tonight. I really just had a question about process. I've heard, so I did download the document that has, some sort of plan that's been shown up on the projector today. And then I heard mention that there's an MOU that has some sort of plan, and I'm wondering, is that document a public document? Is that available online, or do I need
Yes.
to come to the municipal building?
No, it's online and you can find it. I believe we have a affordable housing initiative button on the website
There's a
that takes
tab
you to
somewhere.
everything, but I can tell you if the materials haven't been put up there on that site yet, if you go to the meeting of December 18th, 2019, which was a special meeting we had at the end of last year where we voted on the settlement.
So it's in the packet
All
with
the
the material?
settlement it's one of the settlement documents.
Is it different?
It was, I believe
Is it different than what's in here?
I think the plans are virtually the same, but
Okay.
we flipped the order of them.
Okay. And then you mentioned that there's a special subcommittee of this council that's a design subcommittee. Is your work being done in meetings that are open to the public?
Not at this time because a lot of it is
So the work that
negotiations.
could be
but-
going on in that committee could be different than what is being shown here?
No,
No.
that's the result of the.
Yeah, the committee's been working with the developer,
So-
making requests to.
And I understand that and I should have started by saying thank you for all the work that I know you all have put into this. I know it's been a huge effort, and I, for one, I live across the stream, and I'm looking forward to welcoming a neighborhood to our neighborhood. So I just wanted to say that. But
There was a presentation that I know Michael did with some of the residents of Governor's Lane. Am I right about that?
I'm not on the board of Governor's Lane in
Oh,
the
it was
HOA,
only
but
to the
it was
board.
members of our HOA, and
Ah.
I'm not on the board. I'm just a resident. So I'm hearing all these mentions of plans, and I just wanted to know, because I'm interested in the design. So,
Kristen, there's really not that much visually at this point. The design committee has met several times with Avalon and Pearl, and what we've discussed is actually reflected in the language of that. That's
which I've started to read.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in other words, come to the plan. So there will be a full site plan process involved with this, but I understand due to litigation and settlement that you have to have these conversations to begin to move forward. And I just was hearing different mentions. So really what we're seeing here in this document is really sort of a current.
Right. So we're all new to redevelopment, more or less. This document tonight that we're introducing takes the place of zoning, more or less. So we should think of it as this is the zoning that's being put in place, and then it follows a similar process. So there's a site plan, and when the site plan comes, they obviously have to be in compliance with the zoning. But they'll go through the regular review.
Which is why I started to get concerned when I started seeing mention of zero setback in this document. So as a neighboring property owner, when I don't know of zero setbacks in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods that are not in the central business district. So I'm concerned when you start to put in a document that there's a zero setback.
Yeah, that only applies to the townhomes along Terhune, if they get done at all. That's a question of whether they're
And
going to.
I'm most concerned about the stream corridor that, is running between some of the properties.
Yeah, I believe in that instance, the idea was to pull it away from where the environmentally sensitive area is towards the street. So that's an example of where we're trying to take the site into consideration.
It would just be helpful, and I know you're early in this process, I pay a lot of attention and I do this for a living, but I think for many of my neighbors, it would be helpful, rather than having to hunt through your website, and I know some people couldn't even find the agenda this evening, if you just had a page where, you could see the plan and it was easy to find.
Yeah, I can get on that tomorrow, and we have some highlighted boxes of things that are active, and I think probably for the next year, the Affordable Housing Initiative button will be up there, so it'll be one of the first things that you see. So we'll work on getting that updated tomorrow.
Because that can also help dispel misinformation that
Yes,
starting to happen.
good point. Thank
you
you.
for all your work on this. I really appreciate it.
Hi, good evening. Chris Folio. I'm a resident at 111 Mercer Street. I've been building affordable housing for 25 years in New Jersey. Welcome, Lara, to Princeton. But I have some just basic questions. One is, it is customary for towns that are giving funding to have some kind of understanding as to whether or not that's a grant or a loan, if it's being paid back or not. I didn't see any kind of mention to that in an MOU. I just think it's something that maybe we want to nail down. I'm sure Lara's prepared for that kind of conversation. The other thing is the land. After building 3,000 units like this in other municipalities, it is customary that there's a reverter clause, that the land does come back to the town after the affordable housing is over, or if there's a transition in 15 years when the tax credits are completed. So I do believe there's a whole lot of opportunities to talk about the things that the town's willing to do, and I applaud you for stepping up and doing the right thing for affordable housing. But I also think that we need to be responsible with the town's tax dollars, and I think there are ways that people will feel really good about what you're doing, and there's nuances of our business that I really think need to be discussed. I do kind of disagree on the 6.28. It's a guideline in the HMFA statute. It is used when you're going for points, but if I understood the structure, this is a 4%, and we're not going to be in a competitive. So I think that's something that maybe you might want to have another conversation about. Thank you.
Thanks.
By the way, Chris, I always appreciate your expert input.
Can I just ask, do we have a reverter clause for the land? Does anyone know? Do we have?
Normally, that would be in the ordinance that authorizes the conveyance of the property. It would go into the deed. And in fact, I think, Larry, you and I had worked very hard on that kind of language in Clinton, where we had a very similar issue.
So Trish goes the way. We've done this. It entered into, there was a rule change. Actually, I think it was, we found it in a lame duck session where the rules actually changed, and we had to quickly put it into Princeton. So yeah, so basically, we negotiate these in every municipality donated land. It's pretty standard. It's a requirement by the state. Nothing abnormal. All of the money that you have, all of those negotiation points will be in our final agreement, in our redevelopment agreement, and they're nothing that we haven't dealt with in the past.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I want to say that I'm happy to see the Thanet property reused. That's the good news. But I'm very concerned about a number of things. First of all, cost overruns. I really would like to see some legal language in there that shows some sort of sharing of a cost overrun. I don't think it should just be left to us. And as David Cohen knows well, what happens is at the end of a project, if there is a shortage of money, the finishes get cut and you get a less nice project. So it's very important that the cost estimating be done well at the beginning and that the projects stay on budget the whole time. Secondly, I'm very disappointed that the steel structure is not being reused. That would be the sustainable thing to do. And so, that's going to be torn down and carted away, as I understand it. It looks like you're going to go with stick construction. Is that correct? What I'm concerned about, too, is the treatment of the stormwater and the wetlands in terms of preservation of the wetlands and control of stormwater. It's very, very sensitive property. Maybe it should never have been developed to begin with, but of course it was. And so how the wetlands are handled in the future is very important. Again, I'm looking at it from a sustainable point of view.
You have to just make sure you're speaking into the mic.
Yeah, so from a sustainable point of view, I'm very concerned about stormwater management and wetlands preservation. And, it's a site with a lot of wetlands on it. And as I was saying, maybe it should never have been developed to begin with, but it was. So now we need to do our best for the wetlands. But the final thing I'm concerned about is the language in the document that we just got today, or that I just saw today. It says, all buildings shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the requirements of the current Uniform Construction Code as adopted by the state of New Jersey. Now, we've been working with this code for some time, and also with a new state statute that has not been passed through the legislature yet to improve fire safety. And so we're very concerned about fire safety. For instance, in the existing Avalon Bay, the firewalls do not go through the roof, which is something that we've been trying to work on at the state level with new legislation. So there are fire safety issues, and I don't see any advancement here, given the knowledge that our town has and the experience that we've had in watching fires around the state. Did you want to say something, David?
I just wanted to say, thanks for catching that language there about being built to the UCC, because I think we had negotiated language to say that it would meet or exceed the UCC, and we're in negotiations with the developer to increase the fire safety provisions. Probably not as much as you want, but to a degree.
Okay, well, maybe we can contribute some language on that. You know that, we've been working on several bills at the state level. We had a bill of our own. Finally, Senator Sweeney scrapped it when a bunch of lobbyists came in and made all kinds of changes to it, and now Senator Weinberg is starting all over again with a new bill. So we have been trying to do something to improve it. Stick construction is a big worry, both during the construction phase and during the living phase. And yeah,
I was going to say Grace Sinden was here at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're here for that, but she spoke to the same issue, and this is something that is going to go into the redeveloper agreement, where it's more appropriate, because we learned that it's the planning board doesn't have the authority over the fire code. So if it's the planning board, since this is a zoning ordinance, it's really under the planning board's domain. And so we want to put the fire language in the place where it's more enforceable, which will be the redevelopers agreement.
okay. And I want to read the sentence afterwards because it affects what you just said, I think. It says, local standards which impose a greater standard than imposed by the New Jersey adopted Uniform Construction Code shall not be applicable or enforceable. So I think we have to be very careful not to fool ourselves that we have some kind of an agreement that they're going to do better and then have them fall back on this language and say, well, it's not in the Uniform Construction Code.
If I may, Mayor, on that point, and I appreciate you raising that point, that is so that the planning board doesn't get into a cross-jurisdictional battle with the construction official and the DCA regulations. That does not prevent the mayor and council from putting something in the redevelopers agreement, which is a legally binding document that has to be adopted and endorsed and signed off on prior to even making an application to the planning board. And that is something that is subject to an ongoing negotiation with both parties.
I'm just saying,
so
buyer
I think
beware.
we're going to be covered.
Buyer beware. And related to this, as you all know, we've been working on an ordinance related to fire watch and better fire safety during the construction phase. And that's when the buildings are very vulnerable to fire before the sprinklers are in place and all the rest of that. And Maplewood, for instance, had a terrible fire with their major complex burned to the ground. And one of the issues there was the propane heaters, which seemed to be the source of the fire in that particular case. Each time it's been a different situation. And so we developed language related to propane heaters and how they should be operated properly and that sort of thing. This is not in the Uniform Construction Code. And, it would be a local thing, and you do have jurisdiction locally because that's the way the code is worked out. You don't have jurisdiction over construction, but you have jurisdiction over the the type of construction, but you have jurisdiction over the construction period and how it's operated. So I think that's something else to look at. I know, we've been with David Cohen discussing the ordinance on that and everything, and it got very complex. And I think maybe we stepped away temporarily, and now we need to get right back into it. So, I'm not just talking about this one project. I'm talking about the situation statewide. And I'm just disappointed that there's no language in here at all that shows something beyond the state code, and that is not just fire safety, but that also relates to sustainability. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I hope and I appreciate that there's still time to do some negotiating to improve things, but I think we're not there yet. So just keep your eye on that language if you can, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dozier Hammond, Lee Avenue. I'm here as an individual, not as a member of the Housing Board or the Transport Committee. But what I want to mention, a couple of things. When you're thinking about the negotiations with Avalon Bay, think about what rent entails. Does it include a parking space charge? Does it include amenities charges, et cetera? We want to make sure that the affordable units stay affordable for everybody. That would apply to Pearl as well, not just Avalon Bay. But it's very important to do that because we know that these fees have in many cases made apartments that would otherwise be affordable not affordable, even for a single car or something like that. With, in the case of Palmer Square, $195 a parking space. I think Avalon Bay is $125, et cetera. But there are other charges too. You want to make sure that's included in rent rather than in addition to rent. The other part is this 30-year renewable thing, I hope is part of this, that it is up to the town to renew 30 years unless we want to, unless it's going to revert back to us anyway, and then we have control, that'll be fine. But just as you went through with Avalon Bay, I'm sure you won't forget that you don't want to go through another court thing. We want to make clear that it's up to the town whether they renew the affordable, which I hope we will. And the last part is transportation. I think that Thanet is pretty close to the shopping center, but it's not right at the shopping center, and you want to make sure that people, especially seniors, can get from the Thanet property to the shopping center. And I think we're already thinking about, we're talking about having transportation from the shopping center downtown to be doing. We hope we can, I hope that gets coordinated with all the rest of the transit in town, but definitely you want to think about transit from Thanet to the shopping center as well as and beyond there. So, thank you.
I would say that more inclusive definition of rent is certainly being included, like considering amenities, fees, and parking fees, et cetera.
Mayor, members of the council, if I may, those kinds of requirements will be part of the Uniform Housing Affordability Control requirements that will be incorporated into the ordinances that implement your fair share housing plan. Under UHAC, as we call it, you can't exceed affordability for the income groups that you're designating as affordable units. And it's by region, and then it's decided by family size, which is dictated by bedrooms. And that includes utilities and all other costs cannot exceed a threshold level. And that'll be part of the requirements under your fair share plan.
I think the comment was something different. So I know at the Avalon Bay property, for example, there's a fitness room and there's other things like that, and whether there's an extra charge for that or whether that's included.
That'll be governed by co-regulations as well, in terms of charges and things of that nature. And I would think that you could also discuss that as part of the redevelopers agreement.
Yes, I was
thought
thinking
that
of
could also
that,
be
to
negotiated
hopefully
with developers.
include that in the developers agreement. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Oh, right.
That has been a robust part of our council discussions. So, yeah.
That's exactly my
And
point.
I thank you for your indulgence because, I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. So when Kip was talking about putting in more controls of fire, which may be cost generating, right? I'm wondering if you looked at the senior project to be a beacon in the state of New Jersey, a second beacon, did you look at the cost versus the cost of the $17 million to build it if you built it net zero? Because we talked about, and I don't know what the difference is, I'd like to know that, because we showed you that it doesn't necessarily have to be cost generating. And it would be a really great project if the numbers were not too far apart to seriously consider. And given the fact that the state law says that you cannot, that affordable housing and all housing should be healthy, right? And we're proving that what we're building today is not. And I would challenge that in the law. I think it's really a place that you can challenge it. And so I'm just wondering if you looked at that and that was part of your discussion with Pearl, if they've ever built net zero, what it would cost and what it would look like.
Larry, did you want to respond to that?
Sorry. I mentioned at the beginning that as a standard, we build what they call Enterprise Green and Energy Star. That's an NJHMFA standard, although not in our 4%. It's a 9% requirement. Some of the things Chris Folio was mentioning. As a company, we build that as a standard in all of our communities. We're actually doing a net zero project in Pennsylvania right now. And so we've committed to doing that here for the municipality as well, since we know how to build it. We are evaluating on this particular project, because that one's different, what that cost impact would be. Because the energy code is already so high, and because we're already building to Energy Star, we don't expect it to be a huge cost. But as I mentioned, we are going to give the municipality, as soon as all the final details get set, we're required to put a budget together. So I don't expect it to be an enormous cost impact, but it might be a little bit. You're welcome.
Lara, while you're there, can I ask one question? And this may be a case of a little knowledge being a dangerous thing, but one of the applications that you suggested that you might do was for HUD funding. There was right? Am I?
So it's not specific HUD funding. So it's HUD funding through the county. It's called County Home Dollars.
Okay. This is where a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I just know that there have been regulations introduced for HUD projects that have effects on families that may have a member of the family who's not documented and could cause them to lose their housing. And Leticia might know more about this than I do, but I just want to make sure we do not do anything in this project that if, let's say, there was a family in which a member living there was not the renter, but another member living there was undocumented, that could not cause that family to get thrown out. And again, I'm shedding a little bit on shaky ground here, but I wonder if we could investigate that.
I have to look into that because I really don't know for sure what you're talking about, but I can ask our housing attorney, our internal, like the people that handle our management. I can ask them about it, but I don't even want to attempt to answer that because I do not know what that specific reference is.
Okay. It was a very recent HUD regulation.
If you happen to have an article or anything, if you could pass it on, maybe to Mark and
I'll
have
see
him
what
give
I
it
can.
to me, and if not, we'll do a little research ourselves and I can find out.
Okay.
And Councilwoman Fraga might have something
just
to-
from what I understand of it, and I see we do have an expert here from affordable housing, is that under the HUD regulations, it's considered a family that has mixed status, so someone that's a citizen, and then someone that doesn't have, may not have status, that the citizen would be eligible for the affordable housing, but if there's someone that's not does not have status, then the rent would be prorated. They could still. Do I understand that correctly? Yes. Thank you.
Is that accurate? I thought it was that if someone was living in an apartment without status, that the family would be evicted. But no. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
So it would be, the rent would be prorated. There was last summer a huge uproar that the President administration in Washington was looking to change that, which would say the family would have to make a decision at that time. The people who were legal could stay, they wouldn't be evicted. So what was happening is not eviction, but breaking up of families. And what would happen basically is the family would say, well, if my dad can't live here with us, we're all going to move, and then they're all out on the street. So I don't think, I know there's a subcommittee on the Housing Board that's looking at legislation, and I asked them to look to see what had happened with that, so that I don't know that it went into effect, but what you're thinking is not true. It would just be prorated.
Yeah,
And that has to do with the funding sources. So your question was right on point, that if you're taking money from HUD,
right.
Then it's true. And that's what we see with all of their other units here, why the rents could be different or the requirements could be different, is it based on the funding source that put the project together.
So Kate, if your subcommittee is working on that, can I ask that you know a lot more than I do to just make sure that there wouldn't be any issues if a loan that originated with HUD or was HUD supported would have any unforeseen effects that we don't want?
Well, I think the only one would be is if it went into effect, then the family could be jeopardized in the sense that they wouldn't be evicted, though. They would have the option to stay with that member.
Well,
or
without
members leave.
that member of the family, which in my mind is not very different from being evicted.
But from what I understand, that's currently not the law.
I don't believe it went into effect.
What? So yeah, why don't I don't sit on the apartment management side of our company, nor would you want me to. So let me talk to my management company and our management attorneys, and then we can get the facts, and I'll give them to you as soon as I have them. No problem.
Before you ask a question, can I just get a show of hands on who else is interested in speaking tonight? Okay, we'll let you have the last word, Joel, but only one last question this time.
This is a question for you. This is a question for you, Larry. I figured you're up there. Might as well take advantage of it. I wanted to clarify that I understood something you said earlier. I think you said that your organization manages the construction and manages the building operation in the following sense. I'm a developer. My company builds rental housing projects like this. We build them, we own them, and we operate them. In my organization, we hire the carpenters, we hire the plumbers, we manage every aspect of the construction. We do not use construction managers. We do not outsource any of that. When it comes to managing the building, we manage it, all of that, every aspect of it ourselves. Is that what you meant when you said that your company does that?
So we have a company called Pearl Construction Company, and Pearl Construction Company is our internal construction company. They do all of our estimating. They have project managers. They have superintendents on the site. But just as you described, we would hire out and bid out for, carpentry work or flooring work or HVAC work. We bid those out to the experts that know how to do them, and then we'd select them based on that. But our construction company manages all of those subs, et cetera, et cetera.
And is that how you've typically done it? Your Pearl is operated?
It's how we do all of our communities.
Okay.
There's probably one community in Chicago that's $120 million that we are working with a local Chicago GC, but we're still providing project management support for that to ensure that it's built to our standards. But other than that, yes, we build all of our own stuff.
And is the same true for post-construction, your management of the building, your own people manage the building?
So we have an asset management group that we are actually in the process of transitioning some of our exteriorly owned management company to an internally owned managed company. Currently in New Jersey, we use a third-party manager overseen by our asset manager, but over time, our expectation is that we'll be pulling that in. As you know, until you get to a certain size company, having its own full-time employees doesn't make sense. But we have actually a senior vice president of asset management and a team underneath her that actually oversees all of those people in New Jersey.
So all aspects of the construction and the management would be done by Pearl without outsourcing or not hiring a GC, not hiring a construction manager. All that stuff would be done by you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. If you go on our website, you'll see it has Pearl Construction Company. That's its own entity. It's all Pearl Construction Company, Pearl Development, Pearl, what we call Pearl Holdings, which is our ownership entity. All are owned by Pearl LLC. No problem.
Okay. So I think that was the last question. So we're going to bring it back to council, and I just want to ask if anybody had any comments or any questions at this point. Nope. Okay. Then is there a motion to introduce the ordinance, which I will read if I can find my agenda here. Ordinance.
Liz, I think I don't know if we do all, I think a number of us have just prefatory comments before we.
That's what I was asking for.
Was that what you were asking for? Okay, so I think a number of us.
Okay. Do you want to speak, Mia?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you want to go ahead? You go first. Yeah. I have a comment also.
I want to say I'm very excited that Princeton is finally catching up with the rest of the state in using the combination of redevelopment and pilot to bring many benefits to our town. However, what we have now are only the broad outlines of a plan, and as with everything else, the devil is in the details. That's where we need your help. I'm voting tonight not as a blanket endorsement of this project as is, but as a means to introduce a period of public engagement in which you, the community, make sure we get this right. Significant financial, environmental, and equity questions remain. I encourage you all to provide us with feedback in writing and to attend the planning board hearing on February 6th. We need your input, and I'm hoping that the next 10 days will bring answers that enable both council and the community to support the plan with confidence.
I still have some reservations about the plan, but considering the totality of the circumstances, I'm voting yes to at least introduce the ordinance this evening. My decision is based on my vision for Princeton because my vision translates into my two primary priorities when considering the redevelopment plan as introduced. My two primary priorities are to, one, to meet the spirit of the Mount Laurel judicial decisions, which is developing economically inclusive, racially integrated communities, and two, to safeguard Princeton's fiscal security and stability in the process. If I could have done this plan by fiat, I must admit it would look a little different than what we're voting on tonight. For example, I would have wanted to see more density at Thanet in addition to senior housing, if at all possible. However, there are other parties who have a stake in this process, and yes, some opinions that are different from mine are also very legitimate. If I may take some councilperson's privilege and talk about the issue of growing density in Princeton, it can be considered human to like to see things remain the way with which we are familiar. But we are a town of a defined physical size, yet our population is growing. Therefore, higher density is inevitable. And since more density is inevitable, it is incumbent on us to ensure that this inevitable growth is managed properly through smart growth principles. It behooves us to also recognize that for some in our town, resistance to higher density is nothing more than a code word to be used in polite company to promote the same regressive attitude that led the plaintiffs of Mount Laurel, including the NAACP, to file the Mount Laurel lawsuits. That said, even though our fair share housing was the plaintiff and we the defendants in this case, I must say I commend Fair Share Housing and their departing Chief Kevin Walsh for their advocacy for affordable housing throughout New Jersey and, of course, here in Princeton. Now, this redevelopment plan as introduced is certainly not all I would have wanted it to be, but it is a result of a vigorously debated process among members of our council, the mayor, town administration, our attorneys, Fair Share Housing, developers, and concerned individuals. And from this back and forth, there is much good that is coming from this redevelopment plan. We have much needed new affordable housing units being erected. There is more housing for families, seniors, and the disabled. Considering all the forces at work that contributed to the plan, I consider it an acceptable plan. And even though there's but a small window between a possible introduction tonight and a vote on the actual ordinance, it affords us some time for our public who have not had the opportunity to be a regular, ongoing part of the process to get more involved. So considering the totality of the circumstances, I plan to vote yes this evening.
I did not prepare a statement, but what I'll say is at the time that we voted on December 18th in favor of the plan, what I said was that I had some serious reservations, but that it was the best plan that this particular group of people could achieve at this particular time. Circumstances have changed somewhat with two new members on council. I have some serious reservations, as I had before, about the senior housing and the segregation of, and maybe that's not the right word, the removal of low-income elderly people on a site in which part the Avalon Bay part of the site is going to have amenities that are not available, such as a pool, various other things to the residents of the Pearl development, and I feel very uncomfortable with that. As Councilman Williamson mentioned, I had pushed for additional density at that site, but that was not to be. I'm still uncomfortable enough with this ordinance that I'm choosing to abstain tonight, and I hope, as Councilwoman Sachs said, that the community will really dig into this over the next couple of weeks and give us feedback so that improvements that might be necessary can be made. Unfortunately, this is a little bit of a roller coaster, and you know, we signed that document on the 18th, and that entailed I think a rushed plan. I think we've done the best that we could, and again, I apologize, as Mayor Limpert did, for our failure to get the plan in front of you early enough, and we certainly hope to correct that going forward and make sure both council and the public has plenty of time to review everything.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate and respect the hard work that's gone into this plan by all of my colleagues, and I'm in favor of a redevelopment plan for this property as it rezones for residential use and will build our community through this residential development. I think it will bring a positive impact on the economic well-being of the shopping center. It gives a great home site for residents, both for the affordable and market rate housing, and adds to Princeton's smart growth development. However, my concerns lie in the financial exposure that the municipality is taking on this project. This is just one of 3 such 100% developments, and this senior 100% affordable project has the largest amount of debt that the municipality will be responsible for. This has been and continues to be a very difficult analysis, and I wouldn't have chosen to structure it this way, although I believe we are taking a large amount of debt and could have instead fulfilled our obligation by building more inclusionary units and a positive benefit to the municipal budget. I just want to be clear, I'm not against a senior project, as I believe that we need senior projects. In fact, I'm very much in favor of more senior housing, but I would have preferred to see this as inclusionary, adding more units to the community, as I believe there are a lot of seniors in Princeton who would like to downsize and stay in Princeton. I think the 100% affordable won't address all the seniors, and it won't have a Princeton preference. I would like to see, though, that whatever we decide, this be a positive addition to our community of housing options that our town can be proud of. I would like to see more affordable and more middle-class housing inventory that gives residents the opportunity to live and work close to centers of commerce. I will continue to assert a good dose of skepticism, along with my colleagues, in the process. I will continue to ask hard questions, and please ask the questions of me as well. And let's be sure we try and do the best thing, the right thing, for the benefit of all. My decision tonight is to move forward with the introduction of this plan so we can continue to analyze it and work to make the best possible plan for everyone. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to make comments? All right, well.
Make one more comment, which is, I don't know why, Eve, that you need to apologize. It is not your fault that, that the plan was late in being released to the public. So I'm hoping that our professionals who are involved with this process will provide us with more timely deliverables so that we have the time to release it to our public.
Okay, I do want to reiterate what I said at the beginning, which is that we wanted to have a plan that was in good shape to put up on the website, and there was a lot of back and forth, and I don't think any of us wanted to rush to put something up that wasn't ready. Yep, go ahead, Ms. Ross.
Just, I hadn't prepared anything, but I just wanted to there was something that a point that I wanted to make, and I really do appreciate the comments about, and I agree too that we do want to hear from the public, hear comments, solicit input. But I would just like to add, when it comes to whether 100% affordable housing or inclusionary housing, that I would like the input from the individuals, families, or individuals that would be living in that community, not for us to assume what would be preferable, but to really get to know the community that is going to be living there. I've had the unique opportunity when I served on Princeton Community Housing to really get to visit the site. So I can see the benefits of having 100% where truly it can be a village, a community of families that support one another, and but also the inclusionary. But I can't say that one is better than the other. It just depends on how it's built and what's included. But again, if we're going to be saying what is best, I would really like to hear from the community that would be that either lives there or is going to live there or has lived in that type of development.
And I know I'm not going to be, did you want to, I mean, we're sort of back to council now, but I'll let you speak. Yes, go ahead.
So just one thing to add to that, and I think you've made a really good point that maybe I should have made earlier. Specifically in your senior affordable housing, which generally gets to be a more elderly affordable housing, there is a true benefit to doing 100% affordable housing. We do supportive housing with our residents. Those residents tend to, as we mentioned, they're older, so they tend to live in their units. Our supportive housing team ensures that they come out of their units, that they are active in their community. We provide gardens to get them out and moving. So specifically in a senior community of this nature, again, they generally are an older senior population. There are true benefits to doing 100% affordable because we can provide more resources for those residents. We budget for supportive housing. We do everything from like how to make sure that you're not taken advantage by fraud training. We bring in shot clinics and health clinics. As we said, we organize like chair aerobics, really providing good outdoor spaces to get them out of their units, and that is truly a benefit of 100% affordable. I understand your concern, and I understand the desire for the inclusionary, but in the senior affordable, there really is a strong benefit to this.
Lara, how do you ensure that they really, I mean, because right now the way it's set up, it's 55 and over, which is younger than some of our, I mean, that's not, and it's by lottery. So are you finding that most of them are in fact older?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The 55 and older is to allow those supportive needs residents into the community. And so generally those are still seniors, but we're required by law, because it only goes up to age 64, that for some of those supportive needs populations that we do the 55 plus. In general, we find our population is 75 plus in age. They're generally on some form of, especially the most frail seniors, are on some form of supportive housing as it comes to Social Security only at our lowest level income seniors. It's just the demographic. A lot of them are widowed. Sorry about that. A lot of them are widowed as well. We have, for example, just to show, we only have, I think, 9 or 10 two-bedrooms in there because they just don't get used. We're really a much older population in general, if that's helpful.
And I just want to chime in and underscore Drew Dyson's comments early in the meeting. You know, a lot of people who are critical of the idea of a 100% senior project say, well, those seniors could just apply for apartments in a regular family apartment. But the reality is that by code, only a few of the units in family inclusionary or even family 100% housing are required by code to be accessible. But in a senior project, virtually all of the units are going to be accessible. So it's very tough to say, oh, well, just let the seniors apply to a regular affordable housing project.
I'll just sit up here. Yeah, so all of our homes, especially because they're in an elevated building, they're all required by code to be 100% adaptable. And with those, we build them with all the clearances as required. And we build the majority of them with roll-in showers. Sometimes instead of roll-ins, just from a waterproofing perspective, we use a step-in tub. So it's like a door that opens and you can step into it. Same concept as a roll-in shower. But yes, all those units are made accessible for the residents.
Great. All right, yep, sure.
I'm trying to research this, so I'm glad it came up this evening. Someone came before our board and said that West Windsor, and I haven't been able to clarify this or get confirmation, it made me think when you said there were a certain amount of 2 bedrooms and the rest are single, right? There is a concept out there where there are more 2-bedroom units, sometimes even 3, that allows unrelated people at this age to live together, so it's not as costly. And someone suggested that West Windsor had already implemented this or are implementing it, and I'm just wondering if that might be something you want to think about to make the cost even lower for someone to live if they opted to, if there was an opportunity, if there were 2 bedrooms where it could be unrelated people living together. Because right now you can have unrelated people living together, but the leaseholder has to be, so if you have 2 people who are sharing the rent, I don't know, it's kind of complicated, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
If West Windsor's doing it, we can certainly look into it.
I don't know that they are because I can't get a response from anybody over there. So I don't know.
You can't.
So unrelated, I'll confirm, but yeah, so generally that becomes close to a group home. The tax credits generally require the individual homeowners each individual resident have their own bathroom, shower, kitchen in their unit. As you begin to group those, similar to what Avalon's doing, it becomes more of a group home, which is what the tax credits really are not meant for. But I can research it for sure.
I know in terms of Princeton's regulations, we don't define what a family is, but it sounds like we have to comply with other regulations as well, but we'll look into it. Right.
Actually, we do have a definition of family that is very outdated, and we're just working on it now in the code harmonization.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to vote tonight, I don't think, but because I don't need to break any sort of tie. But I do want to say that there's been a lot of sort of very tepid support for this plan and this development, and I'm actually really excited about it. And it sort of surprised me because when I started as mayor, I didn't have really the best relationship with Avalon Bay, and I'm hoping this is a chance to have a project that's really great from the start. And I think it's one of the most creative parts of our settlement plan. And we have 2 developments side by side. And on that property, we're able to have, of the approximately 300 housing units, 100 of them are affordable. And to have 30% affordable is a really great thing. And to have housing for our seniors, to have housing for special needs adults in our community, of which there's a huge need, and a huge local need, and to have it be in an area where it's really ripe for smart growth. And we're really excited about not just the benefits for the people who are going to be able to live here, but for the benefits of the neighbors, because we're hoping to increase pedestrian connectivity, to make the streets safer by using this opportunity to put in traffic calming measures on Terhune in particular, that there is hopefully a community benefit that everybody in that neighborhood benefits from, and that this creative financing is something we haven't used before, and that is really exciting. And I know listen, like I feel, my heart goes out especially to Councilwoman Sachs and Councilwoman Perrone-Lambros. I have never seen any two council people come on council and within 3 weeks, they are like, I don't even know what the analogy is. It's sort of like drinking from a fire hose, but maybe like 20 of them at once. And, you know, they're hearing, I think they're fielding 100 calls a day, 1,000 emails, being asked to read through thousands of pages of documents, and having a comfort level with that. And I don't think anyone's been asked to do that as long as I've served. So I want to just commend the two of you and thank you for not just crawling under the table, but really trying to engage and ask questions and understand it and make sure it's a good plan. So,
Thank you, Mary.
Yes.
Very much.
But I hope in doing that, you will share my enthusiasm that this is a really great project. So with that, I will read the ordinance 2020-7, ordinance adopting a redevelopment plan for property located on Thanet Road, designated as Lot 4 in Block 5502 on the tax map of Princeton, pursuant to NJSA 40A 12A-7.
I would move that we introduce.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Fraga.
I'll second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Cohen. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
I'm abstaining.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Okay, so the ordinance has been introduced. The public hearing back at council will be on February 10th, 2020, and as we mentioned before, it will be up in front of the planning board a week from tonight, Thursday, February 6th. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned.